everybody. This is Laurie. I am the founder and CEO of Inclusivity, and we are a company devoted to justice and to sustainable fashion. And this is our podcast, Inclusiva Talks. And today we are incredibly fortunate on our podcast to have Laurie Ellis-Young, who is a breathing instructor and internationally known trainer. So I'm just going to ask Laurie a bunch of questions so we can learn more about the best breathing strategies. So Laurie, welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here, Laurie.
Well, it is my pleasure to have you here. So Laurie, just to start, would you tell us a little bit about what you mean by healthy breathing? So what's the definition of that?
Of healthy breathing. Well, for number one, it's breathing that is conscious as possible. You know, when you think about our breath, Laurie, it's something so ordinary that we do all the time and we don't pay it any attention, yet it is extraordinary. You know, when we do pay attention to it and realize that it's this source of empowerment and healing and transformation. So one of the first things is to be conscious of it, just even starting with knowing whether you're inhaling or whether you're exhaling. Starting that simple, because just that recognition, just that awareness begins to deepen the breath. So we start from there. We start from body presence, because, you know, normally we're up here in our minds, you know, thinking, and there's chaos and overwhelm. And if we can come back into our bodies, which feeling and noticing our breath does, then that's the number one foundational change then. And I could go on for a long time after that.
So I want to ask you, so that's fascinating, and you devote a lot of time to breathing practices and teaching them and learning about them. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. It's my passion.
So I want to know a little bit about how you got to that passion. So maybe starting with the first time you remember sort of realizing that breath and the way we breathe is important, and then just taking us forward to how you got to where you are now.
Okay. Well, you know, I don't think I ever gave a thought to my breath until I somehow 50 years ago now, Laurie, in my small little town in the middle of South Dakota, I got a book on breathing and on yoga. No, not breathing, it was just yoga, but there was a little bit about breath in the yoga. And yoga is coordinated with movement, so it at least makes you aware that you're breathing. And that started it, but it wasn't until, a little over 20 years later that I started to trek in the Himalayas in Nepal, and also in the Andes. I was working for the airlines at the time, and so travel was very easy for me, and I love nature and I love being away. And so I started trekking and realized the importance of oxygen, you know, something that we just take for granted, and realized that even though here we might not be at high altitudes, there are so many people suffering from oxygen deprivation. So that really made breath take off for me. I searched out breath teachers, and I took 12 years in a row, I did treks in Nepal. So I trekked all over the country, and I had a sister living in Peru at the time. So I would go to Peru in the Andes, and I started taking other people on treks then, and saw from them how just extraordinary the breath is. You know, it's physical stamina, because sometimes it's all about physical stamina, right?
Yeah.
But yet it's the mental and the emotional and often the spiritual stamina that's behind that. And our breath connects us with every part of it.
I love
So,
that. So you said you grew up, did you say in Wisconsin?
no, South Dakota.
I'm so sorry. So you grew up
Oh,
in your small
close.
town in South Dakota. So when you started looking into yoga, was that something that a lot of people around you were doing, or was that kind of an unusual?
Oh, nobody was doing it.
Yeah.
Nobody was doing it. People thought I was so strange. And when I quit my job in 91,
Okay.
January of 91, I quit my job with the airlines to pursue yoga. And an aunt of mine called my parents and said, "What is she doing? Is she joining a cult? What is this yoga?" And now, Lori, she does yoga. She's in her 80s and she does yoga in a church.
Oh,
So
that's
at that time, nobody, I mean, very few people were doing yoga. And when I started uh, the organization Breathe the Change, after Gandhi's quote, "Be the change that you want to see in the world," because I think breath really does that,
mhm.
is nobody was talking about breath.
Yeah.
Nobody was going, boring. What? Breath? I had to convince my mother also. She was breathing awfully. She never took any medication, Lori, until she was about 80 years old, and she had high blood pressure. And so I'm watching her breathe, and she's breathing in her upper chest, which so often we do if we aren't aware of it, and very shallow, very fast. And I'm watching her take her blood pressure and really scary numbers. So finally, I thought, okay, here's something maybe I can do to help her work with her breath, because she'd always said before, "I know how to breathe," and we didn't have breath training and nursing training, and so.
Right.
So I said, "Mom, would you take my blood pressure?" So she did. And she says, looks at it and says, "Oh, Lord, what excellent blood pressure you have." And I said, "Thank you, Mom. Now look what happens to my blood pressure when I breathe like you're breathing." So for another about 90 seconds, I breathed really high, really erratically in my upper chest. It felt really awful, but it did the trick. And so she saw my blood pressure just went up. And then I said, "Okay, now look what happens when you breathe in the belly." So again, I did just deep, slow, low belly breathing, because what happens scientifically, physiologically, when you're breathing in your belly is you change your brain.
Mhm.
Tell your brain you're safe. And so it moves from sympathetic domination to parasympathetic domination, from fight or flight to the relaxation, rest and relax response. So my blood pressure went down, and she saw it. And she said, "Lori, will you help me?"
Oh,
And that was, I was so grateful, because we had to really, really work, because if you're not used to
yeah.
getting your breath low and slow, then it takes a while. We do what's called inverse breathing.
Mhm.
We um, deflate our abdomen when we're inhaling instead of inflate. So you have to learn the opposite, to let that belly expand when you inhale and contract when you exhale. So that was a good lesson.
So that's an interesting, I'm just thinking briefly, could you explain how you do that? Because I suspect that, some people might not have any idea what you mean by belly breathing.
Okay, thank you. Well, what I would say to them right away is one of the best ways to really feel deep belly breathing is what they call the best medicine,
Mhm.
laughter. Because when something is really funny and you are just laughing, you can hardly hold it in. Where are you breathing?
I'm guessing to your belly.
Yeah, you can't breathe in you're breathing in your belly, and after a good belly laugh,
Yeah.
your belly even hurts. And that's a new type of yoga right now. Have you heard of laughter yoga?
Yes, and in fact, so we have our event coming up, the Minneapolis Revitalization event, and we come in piece, which is the online performance piece, and it's the part that you're actually doing a workshop in. We have a laughter yoga instructor who is also doing a workshop. So,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Wonderful. That's yeah. It's the best way to breathe, and it really helps you to fill your diaphragm because belly breathing is actually diaphragmatic breathing.
Mhm.
And so, if you can have a laughter practice, just fake laughing, start giggling, and then just fake laughing, is your brain doesn't know the difference.
Right.
So you still release all of the wonderful beneficial endorphins in the body by just faking it until you make it.
Which is often such good advice. It's the same thing that, one of the best treatments for depression is to go about your life as if you're not depressed and to keep pushing beyond the depression in
Mm.
order to eventually start feeling better, which is not to imply it's an easy path or that depression isn't real, because as a psychologist, it's very, very real. But
Yeah.
that faking it till you make it is actually a helpful strategy a lot of the time.
Well, and also, Lori, speaking of depression, is when people are depressed, they don't want to breathe.
Mhm.
They're holding their breath a lot, or they're breathing very, very shallowly in their upper chest. And so the active conscious breathing, just getting in their bodies and knowing when they're inhaling and exhaling, starts to get more life force flowing and eases that depression.
So, Lori, how did it affect your life when you first took up yoga? So, how old were you at the time when you read that book?
I was about 14.
Okay. So at 14, you pick up a book, and where did you find, like, how did you come upon the book?
Lori, that I don't remember.
Okay.
I have no idea. I don't know if I got it at the library. That's possible, but it's interesting to think how our public library had a book on yoga at that time.
Yeah. That seems a little
Um,
surprising that you would find it.
yeah.
But so
Well,
how did that change your life
I'm
at
sorry.
14? I'm sorry, how did that change your life at 14? How did that change your life?
I wasn't very athletic.
Mhm.
And the small school I went to, they didn't have sports for girls yet.
Mhm.
And so I found a different niche,
Mhm.
a way to um, be present in my body that felt good, that helped me feel my body, more as a sanctuary. Because when you're a teenager, it's kind of painful to be in your body.
Yeah.
You don't want to be in your body. You find all of these things wrong with your body, and you're insecure, self-conscious, and so it was a way of experiencing being in my body that gave me peace.
Mhm.
So I think, Lori, that is a key to what yoga and breath is for me. Is it's a way to really cultivate an inner peace.
Mhm.
Because when you're feeling your breath, when you're really feeling your breath, you aren't thinking.
Yeah.
And that's why mindfulness has taken off so much, is that it's a way of engendering, I think, deep inner core healing and peace building.
So, Lori, how in your personal practice, and then I'm going to ask you a more general question, but in your personal practice, how long each day do you actively practice either yoga or breathing or both?
That's a great question, Lori. I always practice yoga and breathing. There's not a day that goes by in which I don't. The wonderful thing about the breathing is that no matter what you're doing, you can program yourselves to keep bringing your awareness back to your breath. Before I pick up my phone, I always take one full deep breath before I pick it up. When I open any door, whether it's a refrigerator door or anything like that, I take time to take a full deep breath. So I program ways into my daily life to do it. But when I first wake up in the morning, I come into the day by conscious breathing. And it's a minimum of 10 minutes. And honestly, Laurie, sometimes it can be 2 hours. And I am just totally entertained. And it takes me to this place of such deep peace and relaxation. And, Laurie, I know if I did not do these practices, I would just be crazy. I would be really crazy.
Well, and I will say that for me, the breathing is so core because as I'm planning this event, the Minneapolis Revitalization Festival, I'm so busy and so swamped. And if I didn't practice some deep breathing and that just focused breathing, I think I would fall apart. So I think that it when I'm having a moment where I'm rushing and I can feel my brain just going faster than it can, if I take a deep breath and slow down, it just helps immensely for me to even be more organized.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I think, Lori, I love yoga. Absolutely love yoga, and I probably do most days about a half an hour in the morning, and then an hour or more in the later afternoon. But you know, a lot of people feel like, oh, if you don't have a certain strength or flexibility, you can't do yoga. And that's not true because there's yoga for, there's chair yoga, there's bed yoga, there's all kinds of yoga for if you want it very vigorous or very gentle. But the breathing is everybody can do it. And that's just one of the reasons why I'm so impassioned with it and want to get it as breath literacy as part of curriculum in schools from pre-K all the way through post-grad. I want to get programs of breath literacy and assisted living. I mean, Laura, you worked with me with that in Iowa with a wonderful program that you organized and saw the difference that makes in people's lives. I mean, it's corporate, it's humanitarian, I want to share these practices with millions of people.
So tell me more about your goals for I love the term breath literacy. And so tell me more about your goals for the schools and for assisted livings. What do you want to happen?
Well, I have the organization Breathe the Change, and then about 10 years ago, with this amazing woman, Nancy Chapman, the force, I call her. She's the co-founder of our nonprofit Breath Logic. And so through Breathe the Change and Breath Logic, we have been able to work with diverse populations on 5 continents. And it has just been so fulfilling. I started working with my husband, who is a psychologist, and he has loved working in post-conflict places. And we lived for 2 years in a community outside Guatemala City. And I started working with the kids, but then also the women. And these were indigenous women that came to the house. And I was going to do yoga with them, but they came in skirts because, I didn't even think about that. I thought they would have some sweatpants someplace. But so they came in their skirts. And so what I did then was just change it to breath awareness and relaxation. And so put on some really nice soft music, and we just worked on slow conscious movements of feeling the breath in our bodies. And the women just loved it. They had never felt anything like that. I mean, these are women that they work from sun up until they go to bed, and they're making tortillas by hand. And at that time, we didn't have running water. So um, the ability to relax and to feel a sanctuary in their bodies was just so healing, empowering, and transformational. So that's one of the stories. It's to get this out in many humanitarian ways, working with people with PTSD. That is what my husband is doing right now, actually, in Ukraine, with peace monitors that are on the border between Ukraine and Russia. So these practices work. They change people's lives. And so to share it in as many ways as possible.
Okay. And so so you said you're developing a curriculum, or you have developed a curriculum. And do you have a rollout time frame that you're looking at with that?
Well, you know, we there was a lot in place before COVID.
Yeah.
So it's working now to turn what was in person work with getting it online now. But we have done a lot of in-person work with schools all over the world, actually. And your sister is helping to design curriculum called The Brain, the Breath, and the Heart.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So that's just taking a little detour now.
okay, but you're going to get back on track and get those
Absolutely,
pieces out.
absolutely. We're working on it, and my board is working on it also.
It sounds, Laurie, like if we could really implement this in schools around the country, that it could help change the narrative and could help reduce the negative and the racism and the anger and all of that. Do you think that's accurate?
Oh, absolutely, Laurie. Breath practices are the foundation of mindfulness. And so there's a lot of mindfulness programs that have already gotten into schools. But with breath literacy, one of the things is stress is epidemic for children, anxiety is epidemic for children. And when you are feeling stressed for whatever reason it may be, whether it's you're not included in activities, whether there are bullies, whatever reason, is information cannot move from short-term memory to long-term memory. And so the knowledge of how to reset your nervous system so that your brain can start functioning again just makes such a big difference in children's life. And also when you think that our brains weigh only about 2% of our total body weight, yet at any one time, just when we're sitting, they're utilizing about 20% of our body's total circulating oxygen. How important oxygen is to the brain. And when you're active, it's much, much more. So in a learning situation, when you are closed down and you're feeling stressed and you aren't breathing, you're holding your breath, you're breathing very shallowly, you aren't getting the oxygen to your brain that you need. And so breath literacy, it helps with the children, it helps with the teachers, the administration, with a whole school.
Yeah,
Systems change.
I love that.
And actually, Laurie, you spoke about one group that BreathLogic has worked with is a group based in the Twin Cities called Girls Taking Action. It's a group started by Dr. Verna Price. Are you familiar with that group?
Yes.
It's just an amazing group what they are doing for girls of color. And Dr. Verna's husband, what he's doing for boys of color. So we developed a program to first work with the mentors and train the mentors. And then we went into the schools and worked with the girls and the mentors in the schools. And it was a very successful program. Really amazing to watch the changes. Just heartwarming.
Laurie, can you tell us a little bit more about what Girls in Action is?
Well, it used to be called Girls in Action, Laurie, and now it's called Girls Taking Action. They had to
I
change
like
the
that.
name. And it started because Dr. Verna she's an educational, she has her doctorate in education, and um, a school called her, the principal in the school, and said, our girls here are just having the most horrendous time. They aren't coming to school, they're skipping school, there's bullying, there's all kinds of problems. Can you help? So she went in, and it started with, I think she maybe had one volunteer that helped her, and then it grew and grew and grew. And she was able to get a bill, um, funding from many different places. And so it grew to, I don't know how many volunteers she has now and how many different schools that they work in. But it's a voluntary program that the girls can join. And actually, before working with them, developing this curriculum that they would use, we had to go through their training with their mentors. And oh, Lori, I was so impressed. It was just outstanding what they're doing.
That's wonderful. So it sounds like the breathing work, Laurie, really is for everybody.
It is for everybody, Lori. I mean, when you think about it, it is the most important thing that we do. May I tell you a story?
Of course.
So one of the stories that I tell to try to help people understand the importance of their breath, because as they say, how many people think about their breath? They really think that it's important, except for the fact that it really is starting to be talked about now, and especially with COVID. And there are a lot of articles and books and interviews, and it's starting to be recognized. So, but one story I say is, imagine that the brain, the breath, and the heart want to get together to talk about who is most important for a person's health and well-being. So, of course, they go into a bar, a juice bar. And the brain orders a triple wheatgrass because it makes its voice deeper and it thunders. I am the command center. I'm the brain. I'm the most important. And the heart orders a tomato juice. Loves the color red, and says, oh, you might be the command center, dear brain, but I am the motor and the center of compassion and love. I am the most important. And so then the brain has a glass of oxygen rich water and decides, you know what? Actions speak louder than words. So the brain just goes out the door. And without the brain, what happens to without the breath goes out the door. What happens to the brain and the heart? They all of a sudden realize the importance of the breath. The breath is their fuel. The breath is totally their source of life and everything that they do, and how well the brain and the heart function determines how well the breath functions. So isn't it important that we pay attention to the functioning of our breath and to breathe in the most optimal ways possible for every situation in life?
And what's lovely about that scenario is that the breath is based certainly on how well the brain and the heart are functioning, but also the brain and the heart. If you're not breathing well, you're foggy. You can't organize your thoughts as well. Your breathing
Absolutely.
your heart doesn't work as well. So the breath is just so incredibly important. So Laurie, what are you writing a book? Am I right about that? Or have you finished a book?
Yes, yes, it is. Right now, we are working on the illustrations. It's a
Okay.
book that I've done with my husband, who is a psychologist, and he worked as a school neuropsychologist for a while, and post-conflict psychologist in many areas. So we wrote this together. It is a course on breath literacy.
Oh,
And we have in it just stories, our stories about the different people that we worked with and personally, and also stories about the diverse populations that we've worked with, girls rescued from brothels in Cambodia, to see how they changed by working with their breath. Um, School children, elders, uh, people dealing with PTSD,
mm,
athletes. So it's filled with stories and a course on breath literacy that takes the reader or the listener, because it will be an audiobook also, from how to find deeper presence in your body with a breath, to breathing. Do you breathe through the nose? Do you breathe through the mouth? Do you breathe in your upper chest? Do you breathe in your belly? How do you breathe for if you want to have energy? How do you breathe for if you want to be able to remember better? How do you breathe for if you're sitting with someone who's dying? So it takes you through life.
that sounds lovely. When are you hoping to have it out?
This autumn.
Okay. That's exciting. So then if someone wants to learn about breathing, that book will be not only a guide, but also a story about how it matters. So it kind
Yes.
of contains everything.
Yes.
And I love that.
From people who have been early readers, there have been wonderful reviews, Laurie. The editor has said this book changed my life. So
That's
that's what we're hoping. That's what we're hoping, that it will be, realize, that help people realize that inside ourselves we have this treasure chest of resources for all situations. So
I like
yeah.
that a lot. So Lori, you're going to do a workshop at during the We Come in Peace portion
Yeah.
of the Minneapolis Revitalization
Yeah.
Festival. And can you tell me a little bit what you'll be doing in the workshop?
Well, I'm very excited about it, Laurie, that the name is We Come in Peace, because to me that's what it's all about. I love the quote. It's attributed to both A.J. Must and Thich Nhat Hanh, that there is no way to peace. Peace is the way.
Mhm.
And I so strongly believe that nonviolence is the way that we must learn to resolve all of our conflicts. And breath really helps. And so it will be a course on inner to outer peace
I like that.
with breath
Out of
literacy.
peace. Very nice. So, Lori, if you had to, in a few sentences, sort of describe your life philosophy, what would you say?
I think, Lori, my personal philosophy is that every day I consciously want to do something beneficial for my body, my mind, and my spirit.
Mhm.
And the quote that I mentioned before about there is no way to peace, peace is the way. I have, since I can remember, since I was a little kid, I wanted to help change the world. I've wanted to help make the world a better place. And what I've learned is that masters have always said it, if you want to change the world, you've got to begin with yourself. And I love Rumi, and Rumi says it this way. He says, yesterday I was clever. I wanted to change the world. Today I'm wise. I want to change myself. So it is about that. It's about really realizing that I just can't go out there without doing work on myself first of all, finding that peace within. So that's part of it. Also, that we must really resolve conflict with nonviolence. And I've taken some courses on being a peace ambassador. I'm a certified shift peace ambassador, and that program was just so powerful. And moving through realizing that peace starts as deep personal peace, and then healing personal and collective wounds, learning how to communicate peacefully, nonviolent communication, compassionate communication, working with systems, systems change, starting with family, starting with close relationships. How do you change those peacefully, and then go out, changing the police, changing systems in schools, and going out, and then really truly organizing for a new world. So it all begins at home, inside.
And if you had something you could say to people that are coming up, so younger people, and you just wanted to give them just a piece of advice that they could carry with them and that would help with their lives, what would your advice be?
You know, it would be learn how to learn breath literacy. You know, at 4 or 5 years old, kids are literate with computers and iPads. Is learn to be literate with your own breath, to find a sanctuary inside yourself, to know how to breathe so that it can empower you. I think one of the reasons is, when we work with our breath, we work with our hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's almost a radical act of self love. And so often, in changing the world, we're going out, we're doing things out there. But taking time to breathe, like you said that you're doing, Laurie, in the midst of all that you're doing right now, you are taking time to calm yourself and to go within and to find that, whether it's just even a moment or two of peace and of balance, and to find a sanctuary inside yourself. If I had done that growing up, Laurie, I knew my childhood would have been so much easier. So much easier. So I'd love to have that happen for younger kids. And then, I'd also say, don't care about what people think. Find your passions, what gives you joy, and follow that in life.
So, Laura, you said that learning how to breathe properly breath literacy is a radical act of self love. Can you just talk about that a little bit more? I like that term a lot.
Okay. I guess, one of the first times that I really thought about it, Laurie, was when I was going through the training to work with the girls taking action.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that program is based on Dr. Verna's book, The Four Empowering People, the four types of people that will change your life. If you look at your life, who are the people that are adders, subtractors, multipliers, dividers in your life? And also look at Do you feel important yourself? Do you feel valuable? Do you feel powerful? Do you feel lovable? Because most of the times kids look, I mean, even adults, we're looking out there for that to be bestowed upon us so that other people make us feel important, other people make us feel valuable or loved. And so Dr. Verna wants the girls to find that inside themselves. So taking that time to just close your eyes, notice whether you're inhaling, whether you're exhaling, put a gentle smile on your face that tells your brain that you're safe. And take at least a minute to however many minutes you have time for. And imagine this being part of curriculum in all schools, where you can feel that peace. And then when you open your eyes, it's going to make a really big difference. So it's a way of telling yourself that you're important enough to give yourself that time. You're valuable enough for that. You are loving yourself as you're doing it. And it's empowering you, because you no longer then, when you have that respite from, if you're feeling anxiety or anger, you have a sense of peace. You're not acting out of your reptilian brain. You're acting more from your prefrontal cortex, where you've just sent a lot of oxygen. So you're empowered from a place of deep peace, connection, presence. Does that make sense? Does that?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense. And I think what's kind of core there is that for anybody who wants to help save the world, I think people get caught in, I have to do something for someone else all the time. And so it's hard to take those short minutes. And I think to remember that in order to save the world, you have to be okay. You have to take care of yourself. And those moments where I breathe make me so much better when I come out of those moments.
Right.
So, Laurie, you have Breathe the Change. Is that what it's called?
The
organization?
An LLC.
Okay. And then you also have Breath Logic that you're co-founder of, correct?
Right.
Can you just tell us a little bit more about both of those organizations?
Okay, Breathe the Change started, decades ago when I was doing the trips to in different places, Nepal, Peru. I took people to Guatemala and Mexico and Bolivia and India and lots of places in Europe. And it was more like a transformational journeys. And so to work with people, I'm impassioned by travel, Laurie, and cultures and languages and creating global family. And so, and breathing with people. You know, you might not be able to speak to them, but you can laugh with them, do some laughter yoga, you can breathe together. We would do heart breaths together. That's something that I will share in the session that I give for what you're doing. And then that just kind of morphed into teaching more breath literacy, and then meeting Nancy. She just had so many connections with different organizations. So we started presenting for many different conferences with medical conferences like cancer prevention and brain injury, holistic nursing. Just did a conference last year in Ireland for that. It was wonderful. People from all over the world saying they're taking this out now. We're sharing this. So going into schools, going into nursing homes, assisted living, working with many different types of humanitarian organizations. With the UN in Kosovo, did work with them. With the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, have worked with them. So starting to really take this out to the world.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So Breath Logic is the branch that's doing that. You're really reaching out to teach, specifically teaching about breathing. Okay.
Yeah, they work together, Laurie,
Okay.
but they're kind of separate in that when I'm working on my own a lot, it is through Breathe the Change.
Okay.
But when I work with Venus House, a nonprofit, and I have other people that are working with me, and we are wanting to get a program that is more, what do I want to say, that others can take out and replicate.
Right. So more accessible.
For when I do my work, Laurie, I like being really spontaneous, and you never know what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'll read the group and say, okay, I think this group needs this.
Mm-hmm.
But that's, harder to do for, say, a teacher that goes out and wants to share the Brain, Breath, and the Heart program. That's why your sister's helping me with this.
Right. Yeah, as a curriculum teacher, as a teacher who is also has her master's in curriculum development, she was kind of a good partner for that. And I think she's really enjoyed working with you on that.
It's been wonderful, so exciting, really exciting.
So Laurie, what are your dreams? Like, what is, looking down the road, what are you looking for?
Oh, wow, that's a beautiful question. I'm looking to change the world. Honestly, I feel, Laurie, that breath awareness and breath practices are that big. They are that big. I have felt it in myself. It has totally changed my life. My work with the breath totally changed my life. And as I said, if I had started when I was a kid, I would have been so much more empowered. So I would have known myself much better. I would have connected more deeply with my heart's desires when I was younger. So I believe that breath is something that brings people together on an energetic level that softens them, yet at the same time it deepens them. And we're all breathing the same air. We're all breathing the same air. And I think that there's a reason that yoga, tai chi, qigong, mindfulness, meditation, breath practices are becoming so mainstream right now. It's because people are really realizing, they're feeling the difference in their lives by engaging these practices. And I hope that it is a way that we will begin to realize that we are one, and that anything that we do to anybody else, we really do to ourselves, that we will start taking care of the rainforests. What I would love to see is a ban put on any deforestation at all. I mean, that's why a lot of why we have climate change. That's a passion that I have, Lori, is reforestation and helping to preserve rainforests. There's a man that I work with in Guatemala. I always bring groups there. He has a reforestation project. So he has people stand in the full sun and say, okay, what does this feel like? And then he has them go and stand under a tree. What does this feel like? Do you notice a difference in temperature for people who don't believe in global warming? And they said, well, of course. And they said, well, do you know how many billions of trees have been cut down on the planet? And you think that there's not a rise in temperature from that? So that's something, Lori, I would just so love to see is people galvanizing to plant trees all over and to prevent deforestation of the rainforest that still exists. That's a huge, huge desire of mine. If I could wave a magic wand, and create that.
So any other wishes, goals?
It's also being able to have the resources, the people, the finances that I need to really develop curriculum for all of these different types of populations and have the trainers to take this out and to bring the peace, the empowerment and the healing that connecting with our breath brings to the world. Amen, hallelujah.
Amen, hallelujah. So the goal is save the rainforests and teach everybody how to breathe.
Yeah. Connect people.
Yeah, those are
connect
beautiful.
People at the level of heart.
Yeah. Now, Laurie, do you feel like with your program that you're developing, particularly with the program that you've developed with my sister for the schools, that a teacher really could take that program and their students really could learn breathing during that class? Is it something that's really doable?
Absolutely, Laurie. Absolutely. It will, one of the things for educators is that, with mirror neurons, the discovery of mirror neurons in the brain, we know that we affect each other's nervous systems. And so if educators are not peaceful themselves, the kids around them, George tells a wonderful story about this in the book, Breath is Life. The students will react. And also, the teacher reacts to the students. So there's this reciprocity going on. And then the other teachers feel it in the lunchroom, and the kids feel it on the playground, and and then they go home. And when I was working with kids in this international school where there were kids from over 70 nationalities, I heard from so many parents that their kids would go home and their mom would be anxious about something, and Johnny would say, "Mom, here, let me show you how to breathe." Now you need to exhale longer than what you're doing, stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system. And I have so many parents have been telling me that their kids were going home and teaching them. So, families are involved in this. And then, it's the microcosm, the macrocosm.
Yeah. And it's for anybody, right, Laurie? This is not a cultural thing. This is not related to where you live or where you come from. And you know that. And your book, it sounds like, tells us that.
Yes, it is for every single person on the planet. We all breathe. It's the gift the greatest gift that we were born with is our breath.
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever been with someone who's died, and you've held their hand as they're taking their last breath, or if you've been, giving birth or been with other people giving birth, you know so poignantly that breath is life. And so, doesn't it make sense that the quality of our breath directly impacts the quality of our lives? And to learn that and to know for different situations how to just have your own being be your source of empowerment and healing. And it's free. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to pay for anything. So it will change your world, Laurie. It is
Yeah.
changing the world already.
Yeah. Well, and it feels to me, Laurie, like it is a reminder that we are all here together, and that the division we create are false, and that the color of our skin, for example, is a matter of pigment, and the things that control our behavior and control our ability to take care of ourselves and our ability to heal are all the same.
Yes, you said that beautifully. Very beautifully. Thank you. Yeah.
So, Laurie, what else would you like to tell us about you?
What else would I like to tell us about?
What do you do when you're not breathing and you're not writing and you're not helping to save everyone else and show them how to breathe? What do you do when you just want to relax?
Oh, Lori, it's one thing I just have started to do that I absolutely love.
Mhm.
Puzzles.
Like jigsaw puzzles?
Puzzles. Like a 1,000-piece puzzle.
Oh, I
I
hate those.
just absolutely, I just can get totally involved to where I will forget to eat. I will want to get out of bed like toast in the morning to get to that puzzle, and I will stay up until the wee hours of the morning doing it.
That is
I
fascinating.
think it's in deep mindfulness. It's really just a very peaceful activity for me that helps me to be present with color and form and pattern.
I love that. I do not have. I don't like puzzles. They actually get on my nerves. But I love that you love them, and it is a peaceful activity. There's no question about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So
what? Actually, where it feels like a waste of time, in some ways, what are you doing spending hours and hours on a 1,000-piece puzzle? Well, I allowed myself to do this when in the midst of working on a lot of different programs and the book and trainings, and I was like, oh, I don't want to think about all this. So I allowed myself to do the puzzle. And after that time, and I think it took me like 3 days
mhm.
or so to do this 1,000-piece puzzle. I worked a lot of hours on it. Then it was like all of a sudden different things that I was wondering, how am I going to organize this and how is this going to be and whatever. And it was like it all more easily fit together. And so allowing myself to follow that passion that I felt for doing the puzzle at the moment was exactly what I needed. Exactly what I needed. So I would say, passions, knowing what our passions are, what gives us joy, and following them is just so important, no matter what age we are.
Yeah, that's a reminder. Is it follow your passions and believe that they're there for a reason and that you're learning something.
Yeah.
I like that. And you spend a lot of time outside.
I love nature. Something you might not know about me, Lori, I lived in a treehouse for a while.
I did not know that about you. So tell us about that.
In Guatemala, I lived half of 2 years in the treehouse in the dry season. The rainy season, it was a little harder to do that, but it was on the shores of Lake Atitlan, which is one of my favorite places on the planet. It's in the highlands of Guatemala, so even though it's very far south, you have high altitude, so it's the most perfect temperature place I've ever been. It's a lake 50 miles around. There are 13 Mayan Indian villages around the lake where the people are still living in many ways very traditionally. Beautiful, beautiful people. And there's an amazing international community around the lake also. So many people doing humanitarian programs. And actually, my husband and I met in Guatemala.
Okay.
We worked in a project together in Guatemala. We have our own reforestation project on a mountain in Guatemala. And that has been one of the greatest fulfillments in my life, is to be able to work on that project. Just
Yeah.
bliss.
Yeah.
Bliss. So anyway, back to living in the treehouse. It was a house that was built around a tree in 2 layers, so that by the trunk of the tree, the lowest part of the tree, it was built around the kitchen. And then the upper part of the tree was where there was just a little sitting area and a porch that was built out underneath the branches and the leaves, and then a little loft where you could sleep. And I would fill a big plastic bag of water in the morning, and I would leave it in the sun. And then maybe 2, 3 in the afternoon is when I would shower.
Okay.
And I learned that a lot of food really did not need to be refrigerated because there was no electricity. And so yogurt stays for a really long time. And so does rice and beans without being refrigerated.
Okay.
And I absolutely loved living in that treehouse. It was just, again, bliss.
Yeah. It's very hard to picture what that looked like, Laurie. So, because I'm trying to envision the house wrapped around the tree as a part of the tree itself. And it sounds like
I have some photos someplace. I'll try to find them.
Yeah, if you find some, share them, and I'll post them with this if you find some. So, Laurie, go ahead.
Yes. No, I was just going to say that was a time in my life when I first went to Guatemala to write and to really spend time on my practices. And so living in the treehouse, there would be days where I would just not see anybody. I would practice silence, and I would do my practices for hours and hours and write and meditate and just look at the beauty, and that solidified for me a lot of the practices that I teach.
Okay. And you were there for about 2 years?
In the treehouse.
Okay. And how did your family react during all of this?
Oh, they were fine.
Okay, good. Because it isn't.
They were fine. I've done a lot stranger things actually before that.
Okay. So this one seemed perfectly normal.
Yeah, they were fine with it.
So, Laurie, I am very much looking forward to your training during We Come in Peace, just because I think breathing is so essential. And I've taken a couple of your trainings, and they were helpful to me, even though I had decent breathing practices. But I think reminders and learning more is always a wonderful thing. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I'm so glad that you're going to be able to be a part of that experience.
I'm feel so delighted, Lori, to be a part of it. I just think it's such an important work that you are doing. And I know we have connected before with kindness. And that also is, I mean, it's connected with the breath and with peace, because I feel that working with the breath is kindness inside out. So I just honor you so much for what you are doing. And I'm always on board to help you with anything, Lori.
Well, and I appreciate that. And you are wonderful. Your trainings are fantastic. And I think this reminder that breathing is so central and so important. And that the way we do it, I think people take it for granted that, well, of course you breathe. Lori, one question I wanted to ask you, just as a sort of as a last question that I have, but let's say that I have breathing problems. I have emphysema or something, and breathing is really hard for me just generally. Do you still feel like breathing practices can be helpful, even if it's hard for me to take a deep breath?
Yes,
Can,
absolutely.
can you
When we
explain?
have a doctor on our board, I would always like to, with questions like that, I like to bring in Dr. Rosa. Um, but uh, you know, breath is our life force. And if we aren't breathing, and if we're having difficulty breathing, there needs to be a way to find out how you can breathe better, whether it's on your own, and there are many, many different ways to breathe better on your own. And I've worked with people where they have increased their breath time in holding. I've worked with free divers. Um, just so many different people that have really changed their breath and changed their lives, health wise, um, uh, energy wise, athletic wise. So, with breathing problems, if you can't do it on your own, if we can't find a way that you can do it on your own, then you have to work with the doctor. You have to,
Right.
get a ventilator. I mean, there's each case is individual, so that would be something I would want to bring in Dr. Rosa with also.
But it sounds like, given that, there's still things that people can do, and that learning more about it and having some individual work with their doctor or with the doctor who's a specialist in breathing can really help.
So much of it, yeah, so much of it, Lori, is learning how to, first of all, get your breath low and slow, and start to utilize other parts of your lung capacity. We only use maybe one, unless you're working with your breath, you probably use less than 1/10 of your lung capacity. So if you think about that, it's incredible what can happen when we start working with our breath, the capacity that we have, that we don't utilize. It's unused, buried treasure.
And how exciting that it's buried treasure that everyone has.
Yes. To
Not
unearth it and start putting it out there.
Yeah, I like that. Lori, thank you so much for being here. It has been such a pleasure to talk to you. As always, you're just a wealth of information, and I love what you're doing, and I thank you for doing it. I'm looking forward to the workshop that you're going to do on the 6th of August.
Thank you. And all the best to you with everything that you do.
Thank you.
And keep taking those breaths.
I will keep taking breaths. And everybody, this is Laurie. This is Inclusivi Talks, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
If she's a